My name is Skai, and I'm one of the co-founders here at Guusto. And today I'm joined by Shelley DaCosta, an HR expert in the rewards and recognition space. And so is that what having an inclusive culture means to you kind of personally?
I think so. Yeah, it's a culture where there are conscious efforts, behaviors, policies, even norms to make everyone feel seen and heard and valued with their unique differences, so that you're safe. You're constantly growing, changing, and learning from one another in that kind of an environment because you're different.
Yeah, and so as HR leaders, what are some strategies that we can kind of utilize to help kind of create that culture of inclusivity?
Yeah. I think we have to understand inclusivity is the how, right? And diversity is the what, right? So you have to have the how before the what. You have to have inclusivity and that inclusive culture before diversity is going to naturally happen, right? And HR needs, well, it's not just HR, the organization, but what HR can do is help create a culture where we're learning, listening, we're making those conscious efforts, we're rethinking all of our practices, behaviors, policies. We're acknowledging and promoting learning from one another all the time. And in particular, we're helping leaders to grow and learn and understand things like inherent bias.
And so would you kind of offer lunch and learns, or how would you go about kind of training leaders?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I think part of it is just doing that deep dive with the leaders about their own biases and getting past saying, I have no biases. I'm not about you, right? But it's looking at the people. I heard a great podcast the other day where somebody was talking about, Naomi was talking about the people that you look to outside of your family to help you with problems in your life, to answer questions, to learn from, etc. Are they diverse? And 9 times out of 10, somebody will say, I'm very inclusive. But when they look to that group, they're like, but my group of friends and confidants and in my circle aren't that. So it's understanding that you need to broaden that and find out where people are coming from. And so how you do that, does a lunch and learn do that? It can help. I think it's just, there's a multitude of training that needs to happen for our leaders to understand it, because one leader is going to understand it differently than another leader, or have an opinion on their own biases different from another leader. And some are going to be able to relate to it right away if they themselves have felt bias against them. And so then that's a great leader to have on a steering committee to talk about what that feels like and what it means and how unsafe they've felt in past workplaces and what's different about this workplace, why they do feel safe. And it might be just by the very virtue of calling it out and discussing it, and knowing that they're still, asked for the questions, etc. There is lots to be said for work groups and meetings and celebration days. Lots of companies will have diversity lunches and sessions to recommend, a certain day or whatever it is that's important for them to learn and grow about. And I don't think it's like, okay, we've got a project about diversity and it's going to start here, we're going to finish it here. It's never going to end. It's always going to be learning and growing and teaching and promoting inclusivity.
And one thing that you kind of mentioned there on kind of employee groups, would you ever be intentional about trying to kind of help managers and leaders switch or project groups? So we'll have a few different employees kind of working on this project, but then we're going to kind of switch it out and let some of those employees join some of these employees so you can get a bit more of a diverse experience.
Absolutely. I've seen an organization where we actually partnered people up and hit them with some of the tough questions, like whether it was, at an offsite or a working session, so to speak, of training and learning, and being pretty,
Yeah, like what's a tough question that you would ask? Like,
like being intentional about pairing people up and having them each respond to one another or interview one another about their backgrounds and their experiences, and throw in there a question of, do you ever feel that you have been discriminated against in the workplace, and how did that feel? And you've got, two quite different people answering that question and interviewing one another about how that feels, and then potentially repeating that back to the group on what they found out or what they learned. That could be pretty empowering, because it's a little bit about how do you have somebody walk in someone else's shoes.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because it's an entire kind of like lived experience.
Right. And it goes so far back, and there's so many pieces that we don't know because we didn't live that experience, because we don't have that experience. We don't have that. Our family, culture, values, the things we heard, the stories our grandparents told us were quite different from the stories that individuals' grandparents told them. And we don't know, just like we don't know each other's triggers for mental health, we don't always know each other's triggers for feeling safe and inclusive.
So thinking back on your experience, Shelley, all the different organizations that you worked at, was there one organization that like really stood out in terms of creating a very kind of like psychologically safe environment? And what was it that, because this all starts at the leadership level. So like, what was it that the leaders at the top were doing right to kind of make that sort of environment?
I thought about this one in the sense of, is our global organizations ahead of the game only by virtue of them being global and hiring employees from all around the world, hopefully from many different cultures. But it didn't always go hand in hand. So I would say diversity from a cultural perspective at IKEA was wonderful. It was amazing. There was just so many different languages and customs and behaviors, and it was just the cultural and gender diversity was ahead of the game, if you will, or ahead of many other organizations when I joined there. But then they would still have somebody make a decision that you'd think, that's not, you know what I mean? That doesn't make somebody feel very safe, the way you just treated them in that meeting or how you just spoke to them. And that comes down to that individual not having the awareness, that individual not being trained, and that individual being promoted to a senior leader. Because, all that great work before is kind of undone when now the person that treats somebody that way is at the senior leadership. Like that can be a problem. I've seen another organization where the head of diversity initiatives didn't get it themselves. And so the whole program was put at risk. Like I said, there's so many things we don't know, we haven't experienced. But I find that talking to one another, that one of the best sessions I went on was actually that same organization where we talked about inherent bias in the workplace and had a session where people were trying to be very, very honest. And we talked about where we learn about diversity, inclusivity, in particular inclusivity. And I remember at the time, for me, it was learning from my kids, because I had adult kids at the time. And both my husband and I, it would be challenging, but we would love to have these conversations with our university age children around their friends and why they would use this term versus that term and why they would identify this way and what that meant. And it was just so empowering to learn this, and there's a term for it. It's called upward mentoring. That you learn, and I think it's, how do you create a culture in your organization where people, it's not just top-down training. It's not just learning from lunch and learn, or a speaker comes in and talks to us today about inclusivity. It's having all your employees open up their minds to learning, growing, and taking every opportunity, every interaction as an opportunity to learn and grow or ask a question.
If you want to build a great place to work, check out Culture is the Ultimate Advantage, our free guide to creating a culture where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Click the link in the description to get your copy. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out full episodes on our channel. You can also listen to episodes on the go wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a future episode. Don't forget to recognize somebody for a job well done today. Mucho gusto!